Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Audit Committee meeting of Friday, June 7th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Please, I'd like to start with ask our interpreter to explain how to access interpretation. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. Francesca, can you please confirm we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Excellent. Will that please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good to be back here in person. I'd like to thank my vice chair for doing a great job of running the last meeting. It was nice to be here. We'll now get rolling into the agenda just for planning purposes. Public speaking time, I will adjust depending upon time constraints, but right now my current plans are to allow 2 minutes for non-agenda, 1 minute for the OIPA update, 1 minute for the approval of the meeting minutes, 3 minutes for the audit report, and 2 minutes for the audit plan process. But those numbers may get adjusted so people are aware. With that, we will go ahead and start with the non-agenda public comments. Francesca, can you call public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We have one member of the public who'd like to speak on this item, the person with the phone number ending in 731. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Hey, it's Truth. Happy National Donut Day. If you guys finish this meeting quick enough, you could join the free donut party on the USS Midway until 3 p.m. Now, anal engineer David Zito, I hope you were able to buy some new glasses because they seem to aid you in always seeing the ironies of my comments that I seem to be oblivious to. However, what that really means is that I have successfully kept you on your toes. I was glad to hear that some of you tried to watch that whole 5-hour BOD meeting. If you think that's hard to watch it, try speaking there with no catered lunch. There was no clear direction from the BOD on whether or not to investigate certain things because some of them have no independent direction of their own. They simply voted in political blocks like children. So Drucker, you were on to something. SANDAG requires a rogue detector. And Agnes, I'm on the same page as you. Who the heck even is the mystery management team? Although I think I actually know and everybody's just protecting each other. But besides that, your question about does the team think and act as if the CEO has the power to override the board or not is a great question. It's almost like, is the board in charge or not? Is this a strong CEO system or a mayoral city council system? And Ed warned against an investigation getting off focus into too many rabbit holes. But do you realize that SANDAG itself is a rabbit hole? Too easy. At the BOD, Zito clarified that the selection committee chooses the outside government financial expert, but the BOD approves that so-called expert. So Mark Dorian translated that to, as long as you pick someone they approve of. Also, Minto said it doesn't matter if he comments about the budget because nothing gets done anyway. And then Zito said, there's been great comments today. But question, how many beers is Zito buying everyone after the meeting? I love hot mics. Also, Zito better chair future BOD meetings or SANDAG's going to heck in a sociopathic handbasket. We need more people who are like donuts, not self-centered. Thank you. Have a good one.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Do we have any board member comments? Nobody wants to follow up with that? Well, I'll make one comment, which is that indirectly referred to through the last public speaker as well. We did have our board policy updates, went to the executive committee meeting, and at the executive committee meeting, it was unanimously agreed to and forwarded onto the full board. And then they were heard at the last board meeting, and trying to cut a very long story short, there was some concerns raised about the selection process by, of all people, my mayor, which was the second vice chair of the board, Ms. Hebner. And so she asked for it to be pulled. The board, as usual, was extremely tight on time. And so a few of the board policies, ours included, was deferred to be discussed at yet a later date because as and I think I'm going to send my vice chair to that one because I know he likes talking about this because we just can't talk about it enough. But anyway, so it will be heard by the full board at a later date, and I will do a more complete job of discussing the pros and cons of the approaches that we've recommended. But that's where that's at. With that, we will go on to the Office of the Independent Performance Auditor activities. Courtney.
Thank you, Chair. So since we met last, we continue to be very busy, and we are in the process of wrapping up 5 audits on invoicing and payments, and those will be in front of you in July. We also are involved in our risk assessment process, which we're going to talk to in detail today on the process. So I've been interviewing with board members, audit committee members, the executive team, as well as all directors in the agency. And that process is going well and will continue throughout this month until we present the final plan for you to consider in July. We are also have investigative work underway, as we discussed before, from the requested audit, the requested investigation from SR 125 on who knew what when. And lastly, it is my pleasure to introduce you, last but not least, to Emily Mullen. She has joined our team. You want to stand up for a second so they can get to see you?
Hey.
Hi.
Nice to meet you all.
So Emily is the new Associate Administrative Analyst. She joined us that last week. I guess, yeah, it was just last week. And we are so pleased to have her. She comes from Caltrans. She has a wealth of experience over her career and will be a great addition to the team as well as our productivity. So thank you, Emily. And that concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any public comments on the auditor's update?
Thank you, Chair. We do. Truth, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Well, thank you. I figured, well, I'll just talk one more time. Why not? It's 60 seconds or less anyways. Crystal clear, Courtney. This update was way too long, much more than 12 seconds. How dare you? We have things to do. This meeting could last forever. But seriously, I want to congratulate Emily. I have no idea what you look like since I'm just calling by the phone. I'll have to watch the video later. Hopefully it's a good look. I assume it is. And you'll see my look. And you'll see that I'm quite interesting. 125 investigation. Is that ever going to get figured out? I don't know. Everything's going to keep pushed back to another meeting and another meeting. Because some people talk too long. It's not me, though. As you can hear, less than 60 seconds, and I'm already done. Thank you. You guys have a good meeting today. Bye. Happy day.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Any board member comments or questions on the Ms. Wong Nickerson?
The first item you talked about, to continue to review the invoices and payments. I assume that is related to the procurement audit, the contract audit, right? That there were some invoices that they didn't have enough detail. That's what you are referring to.
Yes, that is.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Did you want to add on there? Okay.
No, that is correct. We're continuing from the prior audit. We picked the top 5 and it's almost complete.
Great,
who you
thank
are.
you. Look forward to that report in July.
For the record, you should state who
Actually,
you are.
I don't think you're here, are you?
Well, I won't be here, yeah. I'll watch the recording.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wong Nickerson. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Francesca, do we have any public speakers?
We do not have any public speakers on this item.
Okay, I have one really quick note, very minor detail is that the meeting minutes did actually call the last meeting a special meeting, which I think it was actually just a regular meeting. Just noting with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve. Moved by Drucker, second by Wong Nickerson. Please vote. And that motion passes unanimously with members Dorsey and Pigney Forrest absent. Okay, with that, we will move on to the report section, and we're going to start with the audited annual comprehensive financial report. And I believe Jennifer is the person, Ms. Farr of Davis and Farr will do the presentation.
Good morning, Audit Committee Chair and members. My name is Pascal Sagvini, and I'm here representing the Finance Department. And I'll be just briefly introducing our engagement partner, Jennifer Farr, to do her presentation on our annual financial audit for the fiscal 2023 annual comprehensive financial report. Our financial audit also covers TDA and NTD and the single audit. Our annual comprehensive financial report includes basically the basic financial statements of SANDAG and 3 component units, our discretely presented component unit, RGIS, and source point, and what was the other one? Excuse me. Source point and yeah. Okay, and RGIS, yeah. It also includes RTC as a major fund, special revenue fund, and the toll operations as a major fund for the SR 125 as a major enterprise fund, and then the I-15 as a non-major enterprise fund. So as you know, we are required to have this annual financial audit done on an annual basis in order to ensure that we are presenting based on generally accepted accounting principles and to provide assurance that we are following the guidelines issued by state and federal, that we are in compliance with those guidelines. So I would like to introduce Jennifer Farr, who is our engagement partner from the independent certified public firm of Davis Farr.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm happy to meet with you today to present the audit results for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. And I put together a presentation to facilitate that discussion. And I call it a discussion because I ask you to feel free to interrupt me and we can talk about anything that's on the slides, or we can wait until the presentation's over for any questions you have, whatever you prefer. So as mentioned, with our audit engagement, we were selected to perform the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023, and we were selected by the audit committee in June of 2023. Last year, this is the first time that Davis Farr has been your auditor. You had a previous auditor for the prior 5 years or so. And as part of our audit engagement, there are what I consider to be 2 primary engagement tasks that we're performing. One of them is financial statement audits performed in accordance with government auditing standards, which includes SANDAG and also the component units, which all issue separate financial statements. South Bay Expressway is not a component unit, but is required to issue standalone financial statements for debt and other compliance reasons. We also perform audit procedures and compliance audits and agreed upon procedures related to TDA and Transnet recipients. We perform a single audit on your federal grant awards and then a few agreed upon procedures reports. So just to give you, the purpose of this is to give you an overview of the scope of the engagement that we have performed for you this year. I wanted to start off with talking about the timing of the audit and acknowledging that the audit was delayed this year. We were able to get started on time and began the interim audit procedures in June of 2023 as anticipated. We were originally planning to start the final audit on October 15th or 16th, around mid-October. We had a delay with receiving the trial balance, which is kind of the first step of something we need in order to start the audit. That was only about a 2-week delay, which otherwise we might have still been able to finalize the audit by the intended date of the end of December. However, there were additional delays that occurred with the audit after we received the trial balance. One of them was that the audit request items that we had agreed to receive in mid-October were not received by that date and ended up kind of trickling in all the way through December even. We received the GASB 96 journal entries in mid-December. So the timing of the scheduling of the audit and being able to receive the items for which we would then audit had a significant delay and impacted the scheduling and timeliness of the audit. Secondly, and probably one of the more important reasons for the delay is errors that we encountered in the balances when we started the audit. So ideally, when the trial balance is provided to us, it is SANDAG team's statement to us that these numbers are all correct. And once we received that trial balance, we detected errors in the numbers, and SANDAG staff also performed additional evaluation during the audit process, and they detected errors in those numbers as well. So that resulted in recording 26 correcting journal entries to the fund financial statements, and then we had additional correcting adjustments on the government-wide presentation or the GASB 34 conversion entries, if you're aware of what those adjustments are. So additional errors resulted in delaying the audit, and for each error, you can imagine we'll run into a problem or have a reconciliation issue, and then we all, both auditors and the staff, need to research those issues, figure out what the problem is, have a correcting journal entry, and then the corrected support and balance is provided to us, and then we audit that. So you can see even one journal entry will delay an audit, and there was a significant number of journal entries. And then lastly, there were pending investigations of the SR 125 toll system. Originally, it was related to some internal research and investigations that were going on. We were waiting for the Fagan consulting report to be completed. And then I'm sure you're all aware, ultimately, additional investigations and the OIPA's investigation all needed to be finalized and resolved, and issues resolved before we could move forward with the audit. So that was really the last piece we were waiting on. And when we were able to see the results of the OIPA's report, it really just kind of solidified that we were never going to be able to get comfortable with the balances in the SR 125 toll system. Which brings us to the audit opinion that we issued for SANDAG and for the separate standalone financial statements for the South Bay Expressway. We were not able to issue an unqualified opinion because we could not receive a level of comfort or be able to do enough audit procedures to determine that those balances were not materially misstated. So our qualification includes the specific accounts and dollar amounts that are in question in the reports, which include 38.8 million of toll revenues, 4.4 million of accounts receivable balances, and 2.1 million of unearned revenue, which is essentially the customer deposits or balances for their individual accounts. I wanted to talk about the qualification a little bit. It's not very common that we qualify an audit opinion, but when we do, we always have the question of how do we get rid of this qualification? So I wanted to address that. What does that look like for SANDAG to be able to remove that qualification? Once you have a qualification, it could be a while before that qualification can be resolved. What would have to happen in order to remove this qualification in the future, whether we are your auditors or any firm, is any internal or external investigations that are going on to continue to look at this issue would need to be completed, and any issues identified would need to be resolved, particularly ones that could affect the balances in the financial statements. During the audit were reconciliation errors between the tolling system reports and the underlying accounting system reports and how those two systems speak to each other. So those reconciliation issues would need to no longer exist. We'd need to feel comfortable that there is a system of internal controls that even if there is no reconciliation issues, that if something were to change, that there is timely detection of errors that could occur in the future, and that reconciliations are being performed regularly. So if any additional errors occurred, they could be detected. And then after you have no reconciliation issues, a good system of internal controls, we'd need to see some sort of ongoing historical look back and making sure and testing and making sure that there are no continued errors in the system. So essentially, probably internal testing or consultant testing to determine that the system is actually recording those transactions accurately. I wanted to move on to talk about our audit risk assessment. This is something that we performed during the planning stages of the audit, and we met with you on September 11th to communicate, or our letters dated September 11th to communicate what we considered the 4 primary audit risk areas. During our audit, we will perform normal procedures of your assets, liability balances, and procedures of your revenues and expenses. But we also are required to identify areas where we're going to spend a little extra time in order to ensure that there are no errors in those numbers. So there's 4 areas that we communicated to you in September. The first one being the implementation of a new accounting standard related to subscription-based information system arrangements. The second one is compliance with purchasing policies, and this was a risk area that we identified after reviewing OIPA's reports that were issued during the previous 2 years prior to our audit. There were, I believe, at least 2 reports related to contracts, and because of that, it raised that issue of purchasing compliance to an area where we felt we needed to do additional testing in that area. Number 3 is controls over information systems. As a first-year auditee, it's a standard practice that we'll do a bit of a deep dive on your information systems for purposes of determining whether or not we can rely on the data for our audit purposes. And lastly, federal grant compliance. The federal government has identified certain programs as higher risk, and anytime you have the significance of federal dollars, there's an increased risk of noncompliance, which is elevated in our risk assessment. And for each of these, I'm going to go into detail about what the results were. And then during the audit, we're required to always reassess risk. So did something come up during the audit that changed our risk assessment? And something did come up during the audit, and that is the issues related to the SR 125 toll revenues. And as a result, we modified our audit approach, and we're planning to perform additional testing in that area to determine if we could get comfortable with those numbers. So going into the 4 risk areas we identified, I wanted to give you some feedback on what our results were for those areas. The first one, with the implementation of the new accounting standard, the standard requires any long-term agreements for subscription-based IT arrangements, such as software or other subscription-type agreements, that you record both an asset and a liability to reflect your use of that asset and your future commitment to pay the agreement terms. So as a result, SANDAG staff and the IT team met to look at all of the different subscriptions the organization has and identified 12 subscriptions that were subject to the standard. There is a new footnote it's footnote 2L on page 99 of the annual comprehensive financial report that includes this footnote about the dollar amounts that were recorded as a result of that implementation. So it was a little under $1 million of additional assets and liabilities recorded. And the SANDAG team will need to go through any new arrangements every year to determine whether or not adjustments need to be made to those numbers. The second item relates to purchasing compliance, and as kind of a first pass on purchasing compliance, we like to utilize our data analytics software and run a Benford's Law analysis. And this Benford's Law analysis helps us detect anomalies in the data. And then from those anomalies, we pick transactions for testing. So here is your Benford's Law chart. So we looked at all of the cash disbursements, excluding payroll, so the regular cash disbursements, and uploaded them into our system. And this nice little graph shows up. And for those of you who don't know, a Benford's Law is a fraud detection tool. It compares the expected frequency of numbers occurring to the actual frequency. We utilized a 2-digit Benford's Law test, so it looks at both the first and the second digit in the amount that is paid within a series of transactions. And it's comparing the expectation of how often those 2 digits will show up to actually what happened with your data. So you'll see the areas in red are considered highly suspicious because they're outside of the normal expectation, which is kind of the line that runs through it. And then the areas in yellow are also suspicious, but not as suspicious as the red ones. So to give you a little more detail, 25 is identified there as that's the first red line. So 25 would be a transaction that was $250, a transaction that was $25,130, for example. It just means the first 2 digits start with a 2 and a 5. When we looked into that data, what we found is a lot of $250 payments for board stipends. So the system is doing what it's supposed to. It's saying there's something different about this set of data. And what's different is the board stipends and a significant number of them that identified that. So just to get into a little bit of the details on how this works. So from the red and yellow, we selected 30 transactions for our testing, and we selected them judgmentally. We looked at the names. We looked if there's repetition of names, if there was any unusual vendor names or overly common vendor names like ABC Corporation, for example. And we picked our sample judgmentally. And then from that 30 transactions, we also added an additional 10 transactions based on the total paid to each vendor. So we're looking at the total amount by vendor and then excluding things like payments to other government agencies or utilities, because we're trying to narrow down actual payments to vendors. And from that, did some testing to obtain the vendor invoices, the contracts, evidence of approval in accordance with the purchasing policies, bidding documentation, and if there was a sole source solicitation that the justification was retained and that it was reasonable for the purchase. And as a result of that testing, we did not find any exceptions in the testing of that data. The third item is controls over information systems. We had our certified information systems auditor work with the SANDAG IT team to review the IT systems that have an impact on the numbers that are generating out of the accounting system, essentially. So it looked at the SunGuard One Solution system primarily, acknowledged that QuickBooks is used for SR 125 without much modification. And then also we asked our CISA to dig a little deeper into the SR 125 systems and kind of came back with a look at the automated toll payment machines themselves. We did not look at the E10 system. At the time, issues had already been identified and felt that any additional analysis that we did would simply give you the same results that you already knew. And we did have a best practice recommendation related to password controls. Currently, the passwords are only required to be 8 characters and they're required to change once every 180 days. The fourth item, the single audit over federal awards. This year, your total federal awards were 785 million. And there is a mathematical computation that tells auditors which programs are required to audit. It has to do with dollar amounts and also has to do with risk assessment and when those programs were last audited. So if a program has more than a certain dollar amount and hasn't been audited in the last 3 years, it's required to be audited, for example. We tested 3 major programs in accordance with the OMB uniform guidance on federal awards. We tested the highway planning and construction programs, which were about $39 million. The metropolitan transportation planning program, which was 3.2 million, and the TIFIA program, which was 537 million. And when we originally started the single audit, the TIFIA program was not included in the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. The federal compliance requirements state very clearly that the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is prepared by the auditee, audited by the auditor to determine whether or not there are any material misstatements. The omission of 537 million was a significant and material misstatement. We actually ended up auditing a different program and then very late in the process realized that this program was missing from the schedule. So we had to start over at very, very last minute and get this program audited, the TIFIA program, and ultimately did not have any findings with any of the compliance testing that we performed for the 3 programs, but we are required to report that there was a material error in the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and that has been reported as a single audit finding and as a material weakness in internal controls. And then lastly, we did issue in the single audit report and a separate letter of internal controls what we believe to be any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls. And I would say these comments are very broad, and within each one, you could probably narrow down to multiple issues that we could have commented on. But nonetheless, we have 3 issues, 2 material weaknesses on internal controls over financial reporting, and then 1 on a material weakness over the preparation of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. For the 2 material weaknesses over financial reporting, we commented on the errors noted in the accounting records and detected during the audit process. And then secondly, on the toll road back office system errors that ultimately led to the qualified opinion. And we have a reference to the OIPA's report within our report. Instead of regurgitating all of the issues that were noted in that report, instead we're just referring to it and having kind of a broad comment that there was issues related to the back office system that led to the qualified opinion. So with that, that's all the prepared comments that I have, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jennifer. A very nice presentation over a very complicated and challenging topic. I think first I'll just check with respect to public speakers. Francesca, do we have public speakers?
Yes, we do have one public speaker.
Okay, can we take the public speakers then?
Yes, we can. The original draw, you can go ahead.
The auditor issued a qualified opinion with 3 material witnesses, including the federal audit jeopardizing millions in federal funds, meaning a reasonable possibility that there could be material misstatement. There's literally no assurance from any auditor. So how are you supposed to do your oversight? Instead of Andre trying to fix what he knew was wrong, he tried to cover it up. Andre had consultants telling him he was going to fail, yet he took no action and chose not to inform the audit committee or board. The investigation also reported that Andre failed to provide adequate guidance and supervision to the financial department. In a letter I sent earlier this week, Andre received a 69% increase in pay over a 5-year period. A negligent CFO, he failed to perform his basic job duties. Management's response, again, a bunch of excuses like staff turnover. Andre fired the employee who was trying to fix the things, but was going to expose him. Abuse of power and negligence, and SANDAG continues to ignore it. In Andre's agenda report, he states that FY23 financials are expected to continue to meet the award requirements and has been submitted to the GFOA and determined its eligibility for another certificate. GFOA clearly states a modified opinion will render a report ineligible. Another act of dishonesty to minimize the impacts of his failures. Andre unethically holds himself out as an active CPA, but he is clearly inactive if you look at his license up in the state. The ethical employee who is doing her job is validated again in this report. So why is the audit committee and board not demanding disciplinary action or taking any action to investigate the whistleblower's claim? What additional evidence do you need to discipline this underperforming and unethical CFO? The whistleblower was certainly disciplined with wrongful termination on her record, which is completely absurd and needs to be course corrected. I don't understand why Andre is still there. I don't understand why, if you guys want to prove that you're trying to be transparent and open and honest with the public and get away from the fraud, waste, and abuse, then these things need to be mitigated and addressed. Somebody shouldn't be fired because they're trying to expose what you are now exposing, and that's not being mitigated. And it doesn't show, trust to the public when we're going to be, continuing down the same path and having the same people that have been engaged in this fraud, waste, and abuse still active in SANDAG and doing things that are dealing with the finances, the $1.3 billion that, is the people's money. And so if you guys want the public's trust, then I would do something about that and make sure that you are going in and looking into it so it doesn't happen again, because there's no hope that it won't happen again if we're not even mitigating what's actually taken place and the reason why all this has been brought forward. So, I just hope that you guys can do the right thing and course correct and turn away from the things that have been causing all of these issues instead of going down that same path. So
that concludes the public comments.
Thank you. We'll now move on to committee discussion. Do any committee members wish to make some comments or questions? Ms. Wong-Nickerson, you can start.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank the auditors. Have done, you've done a great job. It's very clear what your findings and your issues and the issues and the opinions that you have presented. It's like you said, it's not common to see a qualified audit report for a large public agency. So definitely it's very concerning. I do want to ask a question more first from the SANDAG management. What does that mean when we get a qualified opinion from external auditors? How does that impact our ability to get future grants? Is it a issue here? I want to have a better understanding of that.
I'll leave this, I'll let the finance team answer this.
Good morning, Audit Committee. My name is Kimberly Trammell, and I'm actually SANDAG's new Director of Accounting and Finance, week 2. So very early getting into all of these things and learning what has happened and understanding it. And so my approach is going to be to understand the issues that we've had and how to and develop plans on how to correct some of those. So I think, we definitely have had a turnover in team and are doing a much better job working towards this next upcoming audit. I'll preface with that. This can definitely impact, it can add more audits in the long run to some of our specific federal funds. And so that is something that we'll definitely be talking about. How are we addressing and mitigating some of the items found? And then I will turn it over to our finance manager or auditor if they want to add anything.
Yeah, I concur with Kimberly. It's going to add some additional hoops that we'll need to jump through, but we have added resources to the finance department. We are strengthening our system of internal controls, and we will do what we need to do to ensure that we get federal grant funding in the future. But it will make it just some additional steps that we might need to take in order to secure those.
And thanks for, well, first of all, welcome to SANDAG. I'm so glad that you can join the audit committee in your week number 2 or 3. So I'm hearing that, SANDAG will still be able to continue to apply for federal grants, but it might face a lot more audits, more scrutiny in the future, right? So, okay. And then the second question is, do you feel, I know that you've only been here for 2-3 weeks, are you fully staffed? Because, I know with the turnover, implementation of new system, I can only imagine the workload for the staff that you have now must be, very heavy and can be overwhelming. So I want to make sure that you have enough staff to do the work.
I appreciate that question. We are fully staffed. There are some extended leaves and things going on like that, but we are fully staffed. That said, with the magnitude of activity in the area, I'm still assessing, but I do think there's some need for additional resources, not necessarily additional staff, but we have kind of a hump to get over between responding to audit findings, the new system implementation, and we now have a new year end that we're looking at to get through. So that is one area that I'm still assessing.
Okay. And then the other comment I have is I'm really glad to hear the single audit at least has not, basically you have not found any disallowable expenditures. So from that perspective, is a clean, single audit report. It's unfortunate, a very large program, TIVIA, didn't get included, and I'm not sure how it happened because it's so big. So it's a bit, against, as I said, concerning that it wasn't included in that schedule. And then another comment I have, when I looked at the board material, I couldn't find the audited financial statements included in the board package. So what happened to it?
There's a link.
There's a link.
Yes, there is a link that so they didn't attach the attachment of the annual comprehensive financial report.
Yeah, I need to look at all the, all right, okay, so it's up. Okay, I'll go back and look at that. Thank you. Let me look at all my other questions. So basically, other than the 125 related balance sheets and income statement items, you were able to give opinion on the other part of the audited financial statements that, they are fairly stated. Is that accurate?
Yes, the audit opinion states that we believe there's no material misstatements with the exception of the items that are listed in the qualified opinion. So you're correct. Your assessment's correct.
Okay, after all these audit adjustment got incorporated, right? So-
Yes, correct.
And one more questions, did the auditors identify those audit adjustments yourself, or did SANDAG actually, also identify those adjustments along the way?
It was a combination of both. So there were adjustments that the audit team identified, and then there was adjustments that the SANDAG team identified. And in many cases, during the audit process, if we have a question, we will work together to try to figure out if there is an error. And typically the SANDAG team will be the one proposing the journal entry, and then we'll review it to ensure that that adjustment is correct.
Okay. Good. All right, thank you. I think that's all my questions, actually.
Thank you, Agnes. Yes, go ahead, Ed.
Thank you again for a great presentation. And if memory serves, this whole issue with the 125 really came about around October of last year, 2023. And I don't recall the CFO advising us of the number of accounting errors, simply that the information had been turned over to the auditor and awaiting the report. And so you're saying that it was a collaborative effort between your organization and internally at SANDAG to kind of tease these problems out and find out where the errors in accounting occurred? And was that contemporaneous? Because you have October 2023 listed, were those made available to the SANDAG staff and management team that there were errors at that time?
It's an ongoing process. So if we started with a trial balance on October 30th of 2023, at that point, we perform certain audit procedures. So for example, we'll request a confirmation of your construction retention accounts. For example, we receive a confirmation, the balance on the confirmation doesn't agree to the number that's recorded in the accounting system. Then we would ask questions about it, figure out if the number is wrong, ultimately agree that there is an error. SANDAG staff would prepare a journal entry, and then we would record that journal entry and then redo our work or update our audit work. That process of detecting errors and recording journal entries occurred from that date of October 30th, probably all the way through January, February timeframe. And that process of communicating those adjustments, we have weekly or bi-weekly status meetings. So any adjustments, known adjustments or potential errors are communicated throughout the audit process. But it's not until towards the end of the audit that a comprehensive list of journal entries would be communicated, but there's, certainly communication of those errors during and throughout the audit process.
And
It's
these were
not one point of time.
right. So these were separate journal entries. I guess what I'm getting at is one journal entry then corrected would not trigger a second error. They were all separate entries that were found to be an error.
Correct.
Okay. And that information was given to the SANDAG management team at that time in October?
October 30th would have been the very first day we could have potentially even detected an error. So it's between October 30th through probably close to the date when we issued the financial statements in March.
Okay. I think
Throughout the time.
I'm probably treading a little closer to the independent auditor's investigation and her report, but thank you very much.
I think I'd like to add a little bit as far as the finance team. It's really a collaborative effort as well. We are, as we close the books, we're continuing to analyze the general ledger and analyze the information. So at times, since we've already given the trial balance to our auditors, we as well have identified those same transactions that we needed to post. But because we had already given the trial balance, it's identified here as an audit adjustment. But we continually analyze as we close the books in order to give the financial statements in the best light possible in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So it's really, as Jennifer mentions, it's a continuous effort and analysis that is done until we physically finalize that deliverable.
And I think we all realized that the data we were looking at the onset was not, when I say reliable, I mean because of the systems, multiple systems we were using to track, not to exclude the QuickBooks. We can see where errors would occur, but I think we're comfortable that our finance team are working very hard to correct all these errors, become compliant, and check off those boxes from the qualified notations. Thank you.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, back to the errors in accounting. For Jennifer, is this typical of other agencies, number one? And number two, for our agency, is the last time we did this, did we have those same type of problems?
Well, in a perfect world, there's no audit adjustments detected by the auditor ever, right? That perfect world doesn't exist very often. I would say if I had to give you a probability, I would say 70% of our clients have errors in the accounting records that are detected during the audit process. What is unusual is the number of them. So normally during an audit, you might find 2 or 3 errors. So the magnitude of them is concerning, something you should be concerned about. And previously I was on the audit for SANDAG a while ago, and I would say that magnitude of errors was never present in those historical years. I'm not sure I answered your question. It
does answer. That's exactly what I was looking for, because, you know, having gone through audits of other agencies, that's something that I've rarely seen. So, is there any, for the SANDAG staff, is there any specific reason why the magnitude happened this year versus in the past?
I think it was a very challenging year for many factors last year for the team. We had the ERP implementation. We had a lot of staff turnover, and just, I think everybody was over allocated. So for this year, all we can do is kind of look forward and see how we can improve this coming year. We're improving our communication within the department. We are establishing a timeline in order to successfully meet that deliverable. We are focusing on training and providing the resources that the team needs in order to confirm and have all of the information available for the audit to be as smooth as possible once we start. So we're just going to be focusing going forward on what we can do to make it better. But I believe last year it was just a lot of things happening and over allocating the team. We did do a lot of things correct as well. As Jennifer mentioned, GASB 96 was implemented last year. That was a heavy lift on the team. There was a lot of work that needed to be done in order to get down, to get the population down to 12 contracts. So, you know, we'll focus on improving the areas we need to and just look forward and look for a new year and a new beginning for us.
So with the implementation of a unified ERP system, how is that going in terms of the monthly, getting the monthly ending balances, et cetera, on a timely basis?
So here at SANDAG, we do not perform a soft month-end close, but we are working hard in order to ensure that all of our transactions in the general ledger is stated correctly. So we are putting together year-end tasks. We're analyzing the general ledger. We're still doing a lot of work because we have a new ERP system right now to validate and ensure that the information is accurate. Another wrinkle, if we say this year, is that we basically have to work with 2 systems, one solution and ERP. So we're taking a lot of steps, additional steps that we need to do to validate that data for financial reporting.
So SANDAG doesn't create a monthly budget type of report or anything like that? It's just a yearly basis that you look at that?
Not that, we do look at it throughout the year. We do quarterly reports on some, I believe RTC or the SR 125. We do quarterly reporting to outside agencies, but we don't do a soft close in our general ledger. So we are able to post back to prior periods as we pay invoices.
And if I could just add, so at my last agency, we implemented the same system that SANDAG has been working on implementing. And we're still in the thick of it. There's still a number of areas of the new system that need to be implemented. So really, until you have everything working together and in sync, you're going to still have some manual processes or some things that are being done as an import rather than being done directly in the system. The ERP system, something I'm looking at as I'm new to the agency, and we're less than 6 months in. I would say compared to my last agency, SANDAG's doing pretty good. That's 6 months in, and in part it's because we're phasing in some of those other areas over time. So as we said, it is going to be a little more of a challenge this year having the two systems going into the audit. I think you'll really kind of see the synergy of the single system and everything coming together in probably another year or so, because you have the learning curve of everybody getting into this new system and learning that. So it does help with, I will say that the ability to monitor and view where things are in this system is much better than some other systems. I haven't worked with the one that SANDAG had before, but there is a lot in that system, a lot of powerful tools in the system, but you have to learn how to use those.
You all good? Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Wong-Nickerson. You can go ahead.
So first of all, I was really surprised to hear that you don't do soft monthly close. Hopefully, I would say, I would encourage you to look at that, down the road, because it does serve a lot of, good purpose when you do a monthly close, right? Then you have a fixed number to compare, because otherwise your system number changes every day. Second thing, I want to make sure that the staff and auditors come together and OIPA too, right? When there are issues, because I do think it will be a high risk year, because, now we have, new leadership, new CFO, new finance director, new system, and, also trying to fix a 125. A lot of things are not really pointed to this high risk year. And I really would like the staff to feel empowered if there are issues, that you can raise them all the way to the top and get help and get resources to fix them, right? And don't wait for that to, linger for a long time. And I hope you feel that you're empowered to do that, because I do think it's very important that I don't think the agency can afford to have another year, next year to get another qualified opinion. I think that would be very, detrimental to the agency. So I would encourage, all of you to, if you see issues, make a lot of noises, make sure, OIPA knows, audit committee knows, management knows, and then we'll figure out, hopefully everyone working together can figure out how to solve the problems together. I'm also wondering, with this high risk year, from auditor's perspective, does it make sense to do an interim audit, rather than waiting for the year to be over?
Yes, we did an interim audit last year as well, and it is part of our standard audit procedures. We normally spend 2 to 3 weeks doing preliminary testing and an interim audit, and we are scheduled to do that in July.
Do you think it makes sense to do a more enhanced interim audit rather than the regular, process or steps that you do?
I can tell you that we do everything we possibly can short of testing the numbers, because the numbers are not provided to us during the interim audit process because they're preliminary at that point. But we do most of our control testing, planning and preparation, and in some cases we'll do single audit testing in the summer as well if we feel confident that the major programs are not going to change. But we're always incentivized to do as much as we can during the interim audit and take that, the time-intensive part of the audit outside of a traditionally busier time of year for us.
So would those interim audit be able to help identify, the issues or those audit adjustments that were needed in this past year?
I mean, yes and no. As an example, if there's a new debt issuance or a refunding, we could and do look at journal entries of those transactions, how things are recorded. So we can look at transaction information to determine the accuracy of it. But until we see the final numbers, like we cannot test whether or not a bank reconciliation is accurate until we see how it's reported in the accounting records, for example.
So I guess you would do whatever you could during the interim, probably more than you normally would in other audits, or?
Based on the risk profile of this engagement and the issues that we found in the past, we will certainly be providing or be performing additional tasks, having larger samples. It increases the overall risk of the audit, which drives the audit procedures and will, as mentioned, result in more auditing being done and larger sample sizes, lower materiality thresholds, so that as the increase of risk profile goes up, it results in more auditing. So we will definitely be doing more this summer than we did last year.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to start with a comment just because we may have somebody here that doesn't need to be here much longer, but just a comment on the audit results, which was, and I wanted to check in with staff or make sure that staff's going to look into it. And is that one of the audit findings that was noted from the IT perspective was a recommendation to increase the frequency and complexity of password changes within the system. And just as someone that's in the industry, I don't believe that's current industry best practices. I don't know I think we have someone here from IT. I don't know if you want to confirm that you're comfortable with that recommendation or think that it should be looked at differently.
Committee, sorry. Chair, Bill Paris, I'm the Director of IT for SANDAG. The audit finding would have been limited to one solution, which is the system we've just replaced. Our standard network practice is we cannot use the last 5 passwords. We require complexity. They have to be more than 8 characters. And on top of all of that, we require multi-factor authentication to get into our network. So I don't believe the audit finding applies universally to our technology, but to a system that we have now replaced.
Then do you think that doing more frequent password changes makes sense for that system for some reason?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's the gist of my question. So I just saying, I think from a staff perspective, as we go through this, if there's a way that this team or whatever can make a recommendation that we actually don't follow that recommendation as an organization agency and just suggest that IT follow current best practices. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So that's that. I'll start my questions with something that's going to seem a little bit silly given our current experience, but I did notice in the schedule of findings and costs that one of the answers was auditee qualified as a low risk auditee, and the answer is no. Is it actually possible for an organization of the size and complexity and scope to qualify as a low risk auditee?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. And so we should be able to set an objective for management. We need to get that no to a yes, then. That's a reasonable thing to do, right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Obviously, we're a little bit away from that. The next question I have is, at the start of the presentation, you made a comment about things that were causing delays in the production of the audit. At least until today, my assumption is that most of the delays were driven by the challenges that we have with the 125 systems, but it looked like you ran into a lot of other issues as well. Is that correct? That caused delays that were unrelated to the 125?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, with the audit adjustments, I believe there was only maybe 2 related to SR 125.
Okay, and so would most of the delays then be related to the corrections findings that we needed to do? Because you were talking about a lot of delay in getting information, and that delay in getting information was unrelated to 125 or related to 125?
Both,
Right.
mostly unrelated.
Okay. And so my question to management then is, do we understand why we had that problem this year? I don't recall having these types of notable issues in prior years in delay of sharing information that the auditor is requesting to get.
Yeah, we were not able to meet the timelines last year because the team was over allocated with the ERP implementation and some staff turnover. But we are focusing on this year establishing a timeline with milestones and check-ins weekly with the team to ensure that we meet that timeline this year. Because we understand the importance of being able to work cooperatively with our auditors and ensure a successful deliverable at the end.
Okay, thanks.
Chair, can I
Yeah.
piggyback on that?
Sure.
For everybody's knowledge, I know the trial balance was received in the end of October. When was it requested to be delivered, and when would it be requested to be delivered this coming year?
For last year, it was requested to be delivered in mid-October. It was either the 15th or the 16th, whichever the Friday was before we started the audit. For the upcoming year, when we perform the interim audit in July is when we will discuss those dates and milestones and come up with an agreeable date. However, in order to, if the goal is to finalize the audit by the end of December, it would need to be a similar timeline.
Okay, thanks. Then on to the section that was the status of the prior year audit findings. I noticed that the typical response was we did not identify any material errors with blah. And as such, this finding is considered resolved. Whereas, for example, with the ARGIS one, the recommendation was strengthen controls around accounts payable, additional layers of review, and additional training for staff was the recommendation. So do you actually go and verify that that was done? Or did you just say, well, in ARGIS, everything worked out okay, and so we assume this issue is resolved?
The latter.
Well-
But we did not identify the same issues
Okay,
in the current year, and we did not identify the same weaknesses.
okay. So we don't know if these recommendations were actually implemented at this point in time. Is that correct?
We could assume that they were implemented because our procedures did not result in detecting errors in ARGIS's financial statements.
Okay, I'm not sure that makes sense to me because it seems like things can slip through, and whether they slip through or not is based upon the amount of controls that are in place. But I do think personally, it would be helpful for management to be able to come back and say, these are the recommendations that were implemented. And just so we know that something was done as opposed to everything just happened to work out this year, as opposed to something slipping through. Then next question, I don't know how easy it is to answer this, but it is for management to start with, which is, do we think we have the ability? I mean, we know that the new system that's going to replace the back office for the 125 is not going to be in place till the end of the year at best, if I'm correct. Given that we've got the current year, which is about to close out, and we've got the next year coming up, which is still going to rely in part on the old system. Do we have a known path forward to get to a audit without a qualified opinion, given that we're going to have to rely on the system at this point?
I think that's something that we need to develop, and we'll get back to you in the committee with the plan of how we're going to move forward to improve the outcome of the audits.
Okay. Yeah, and given that, I mean, given the level of challenges that we've run into, I mean, I certainly would like to request that we come back at the appropriate time. I mean, July meeting's busy, August we're supposed to be dark. Maybe September is a good time to come back and have management give us an update on how this is looking and whether or not we've got a plan in place and whether or not we're going to be able to hand off the financial information in time and we feel like we're still staffed okay. So I think I would very much like to see that come back so we know that these issues are going to get resolved and in a reasonable time. That makes sense.
We are committed to doing that.
Okay. Let's see, I think That is the questions that I have. Any other further follow-up questions or comments? This item's information only. I would like to once again thank you, Jennifer, to you and your team for working through this. It obviously was a lot of work, and you did a good job presenting the information, and hopefully you can continue, as Ms. Wong-Nickerson was saying, collaborate with the team, and we can have a cleaner report next year. And with that, thank you. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is Office Independent Performance Auditor Preliminary Fiscal Year 2025 Annual Audit Plan Process. Courtney.
Thank you, Chair. So you have in your packet today the preliminary annual audit plan, and I'll walk through the process and then entertain questions and discussion. The plan as put forward, or the documentation, is to accomplish 2 things. First, it's to refresh the formatting and seeing it presented as I want to present it, and wanting to know as we review this and as we engage in the conversation, where you have questions, but also where you would like to see things differently, or more information or less information. And then the goals, as you'll see in the plan, are the goals I'm proposing for next fiscal year. The performance measures are the same, so I'd like to get into a conversation about that. I'm happy just to briefly walk through the document page by page. And then the other part of this is that it will be populated for your July 11th meeting based on the risk assessment process that you see contained in this document for the proposed audits that we will be recommending for next fiscal year. In addition to the items that have already been recommended, as such, in the last audit committee meeting, it was determined that we would move forward on the sole source process to evaluate that in the next contracting process, as well as look at the HNTP contract. So when we're walking through the document that you have on page 2 is just a message from myself. Page 3 is just trying to set the stage from the legislation that enacts the OIPA, Office of the Independent Performance Audit, as well as Board Policy 39, which established the audit committee, as well as the requirements or the performance items for the IPA to undertake. We talk about in this page as well that we do follow GAGAS, which is Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, and that was mandated in AB 805. We also go through a peer review, which we can talk about at a later time, but I just want to mention we go through a peer review every 3 years, and then that peer review gives you the quality assurance that our systems are such that you can rely on our work. The next page talks about what we produce. So the majority of our work product is performance audits, and we look at economy, efficiency, effectiveness, equity, and compliance, and that is the mainstay based on this annual risk assessment process that we go through to determine really where are the high risk areas in the organization so that we can apply our resources appropriately given our limited resources. The other things that we produce are annual reports. We produce an annual whistleblower hotline report that will show you the activity in the hotline program. It will also show you less significant investigations where we have substantiated it. You'll get a synopsis of what we found. We also have the annual work plan, which is before you in preliminary form right now. That's considered one of our annual reports. And then lastly, we have the CAP, which is the corrective action plan. And we will be presenting that to you this year in September. So those are the 3 annual reports that we're slated to perform. We perform investigations because one of our main duties is to make sure that we are the oversight body that performs investigations into allegations, fraud, waste, abuse, and gross mismanagement of the organization. And as you saw previously, when we came and modified the audit work plan, it was to say that we were embarking on a significant investigation and to ensure the resources were there. And that was an investigation that had been requested in the public at the board meeting as well as the audit committee. And then the corrective action plan follow-up reports are that periodically through the year, you all may request a specific update on a audit that has been presented before, or an investigation to that matter. And so we can do periodic updates. And then the last is special requests, and that's really based on the resources available to undertake additional work requested by the board or the audit committee. The strategic goals outlined for fiscal year 2025 are in 4 different buckets. The first one is policy, process improvement, and system controls. And this is to conduct, again, the mainstay of our work, performance audits based on our high-risk areas. Goal 2 and Goal 3 are related to the whistleblower hotline program and the detection of fraud, waste, and abuse. And you saw previously when I brought forth the modifications to the previous plan that we would be focused more significantly in this area in relation to our goals. And so these points identify that with timely investigations in Goal 2. And then Goal 3 is really that education piece. We know that when people are aware of a whistleblower hotline and they understand why it exists and they understand their protections with confidentiality and being anonymous, as well as retaliation, that then we can increase the tips. We also want to broaden that circle out further to start to do a plan to outreach to the contractors. So that we'll be preparing that in this plan, but it'll be executed in the next year because I think we probably have enough to keep us busy with the current outreach plan. And then last is certainly that development and monitoring of the corrective action plan. And this is twofold. We want to make recommendations that are relevant, that they're concise, that they address the core issues. We want to make sure that the cost benefit of implementing those recommendations makes sense. And we also want to monitor the responsiveness. So our commitment is to make sure that we bring relevant, timely, concise recommendations with our reports, and then that we follow up and make sure that we get implementation to those recommendations. On the next page is the performance measures, and you'll see the recommended performance measures. Many of them are carried forward from the previous report, and then some of them are added. We have audits per auditor of 1.5. We are calculating that based on, there's 2 adjustments that we're doing. One is a normal adjustment, which would be that myself and the deputy IPA are each counted as a half-time FTE, given the level of supervisory and administrative responsibilities in this calculation. And then we are bringing forward onboarding 2 new employees once we get through the recruitment for a audit manager and an audit senior. We're going to bring them on in this calculation at a 0.5 FTE given to, we don't know when the recruitment will conclude and just natural onboarding. But in all things, I hope to exceed the 1.5, but that is our calculation that I'm proposing for the target. Budgeted versus actual audit hours per engagement is 70%. What you'll note in this process versus the previous year is that we are not, when we come and propose the audits, so our preliminary audit process involves us going in and doing preliminary planning. It is that time when we determine our scope, when we determine our hours. So your audit plan will not, your annual audit plan will not include an audited number. However, we will have documentation that states that these are our projections of what we anticipate this audit to be when we go through the process to evaluate these measures. And then if we have to make adjustments to those so that we can then calculate that 70%. Increased whistleblower hotline reporting. This will be over this year. We anticipate a 50% increase over the number of complaints being issued this year. The education and outreach, we're committing to 3 education and outreach events for the employees. Transparency and accountability. This will be the report that we bring to you in September, making sure that every year you receive a full-on report of what the state of all the recommendations are, and the status would be implemented, partially implemented, and not implemented. We are working also behind the scenes to publish that to a dashboard to our website, and that is one of Emily's projects. So hopefully not only are you going to have the report in September, but we'll update you as we make improvements, as we make process, as we move through that process. So when you can anticipate that. And then also we will work with Victoria from management to maintain a report of all recommendations from audits that are occurring in the agency. That also will be captured in the dashboard that we're talking about ultimately. And that will be presented in the September report. The difference between OIPA's recommendations and management's, all the other audit recommendations, is that OIPA will be applying procedures that we will bring forward to this body to review as well on what our follow-up procedures are. So when we bring that report and tell you whether something's implemented, not implemented, or partially implemented, our team will apply procedures to that. In relation to management and the update on all the recommendations for the organization, then we will look for Victoria at that time to report out to you, much to the chair's question today. How do you really know if a recommendation has been implemented? In relation to evaluating the IPA from leadership standpoint, we're recommending a 90% goal here, so that 90% of the goals that I have presented on the previous page would be implemented. And additionally, a 360 evaluation of the IPA. And we will put together and work with the audit committee in putting together that tool of a survey tool, so that it's easy for the survey to calculate the percentage and we can get it out to our stakeholders, meaning our auditees, the board, audit committee, staff. And then for staff development, we will adhere to making sure that all our team receives 40 annual hours of education. In addition, when we brought forward the organization chart to you and talked about our staffing needs, committed to having a contracting line in OIPA. So we're going to be focused on increasing our contract audit skills there, and as well as our investigation skills. So here there's a commitment that 50% of our audit team will participate in specialized training. So those are the proposed performance measures, and look forward to your thoughts on those, on changes or additions. Then the rest of the document leading up until we get into the actual proposed work is the risk assessment process. So the risk assessment process is really used to detect, evaluate, and prioritize prospective audits based on the level of risk presented to the organization. This details all the various risks that we consider, from the meetings that are being conducted right now with the board members, audit committee, executive team, as well as the directors. Next year, we will expand that to offer all project managers and SANDAG the opportunity to sit down with OIPA and go through that risk interview. We're going to look at emerging or existing risks. And you'll see here that it categorizes external risks and internal risks. So we look at political risk, economic, social, technological, and legal and compliance risk when we look at external risks. And then internally, we'll look at capital, meaning are there already errors impacting malfeasance that we should consider? People, is an inability to hire people quickly. Why is that? Process, lack of adequate policies and procedures, which we've talked about before in previous audits. Technology, always what is the state of our technology? So these are some of the things that we're considering as we evaluate the risk to then propose the plans to you. And we will look at fiscal impact. We will also look at SANDAG's program and resource delivery. And when we look at that, the key areas that SANDAG is to deliver on, and then look, are there changes going on, or things impacting those departments that would increase the risk. We will also evaluate it finally through the lens of urgency, available resources, and a duplication of effort, making sure that there isn't another audit or assessment team evaluating those same things. Lastly, per the policy, board policy 39, we're required to look at the annual work plan on a quarterly basis, just to make sure that I can bring any changes or concerns to you in a timely basis. And we have to have flexibility in the process because something may come up, such as SR 125, and we want to make sure that we have the resources dedicated to that. Then on the last page of the plan is the fiscal year 2025, and this is really a placeholder, which we will populate then for the July meeting. We have an appendix, which will have a page that includes more information on OIPA, our accomplishments in fiscal year 2024. And then lastly, you will get to see the population of audit topics considered at a high level topic summary. So you can see the vast amount of potential audits that were considered as we then determine the final audits to propose to you in July. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers?
Thank you. We do have one public commenter, the original draw. You can go ahead.
Yeah, when you're talking about all of these plans moving forward and, you know, whistleblower protections and how, I mean, obviously when you have, you know, something being exposed by a whistleblower and then you have to do all of this extra work, which should have been being done anyway. I just don't see any end in sight for, you know, the same thing happening to somebody else who may be a whistleblower and want to bring forward some fraud, waste, and abuse that should be addressed, like, because with Lauren being fired, it just doesn't make sense that she could be retaliated against. There's not been any disciplinary action. I don't know if we're protecting people here, but that's what it seems like, because the fact that the people that have been engaged in the fraud, waste, and abuse are still there, able to do, continue down that same path. And then the people that are, you know, trying to stop it are, you know, retaliated against. I don't see how you could say that that's not going to happen again if nothing has been done to mitigate it and to make sure that, you know, you're addressing that issue, not just kind of brushing it under the rug and moving forward and past it, acting as though it didn't happen. People shouldn't have to file lawsuits in order to get things mitigated. That should be something that you're looking into and not just being like, you know, just trust us that you'll be protected if, you know, you come forward, because proof is in the pudding that it's actually not the case if, you know, it's already happened and nothing is being done to the people that actually did it and were engaged in all of the, you know, again, fraud, waste, and abuse. So it would behoove you guys to address that and not, you know, just kind of push it to the side and hope people forget about it so that you can, you know, kind of move forward and have people trust you. When you want people to trust you, you have to like show them with the fruits of your labor that, you know, they're not going to be retaliated against, that you absolutely won't put up with it, and you're going to mitigate it by dealing with the people that have engaged in that problem.
That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you. I don't know, Courtney, if you want to address any of that, because I think one of the key points is our whistleblower program wasn't used in this instance, and I don't think we have any instances of retaliation about people who actually have used this whistleblower program, correct?
I think, yes, just so that the public is aware. So the whistleblower hotline is a program that employs, and we're encouraging, just as Member Wong Nickerson said, if you see something and you are concerned, to say something. If you go to management and management is not responding to you, to come to OIPA and make sure that your concerns are known. So I can speak to this program and the protections of retaliation from when this program is engaged, and I would highly encourage that to occur, that employees find a safe place to come to us and to discuss that. And then that is when the retaliation procedures apply.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to make sure people are comfortable and realize that if they go through this program, there are protections in place. And one of the challenges with the issue referenced by the member of the public is they didn't go through this program. They did a different route. So use this program. It's a good program and you will be protected. So I think a good point. Any other member comments or questions about what you've heard with respect to the change? This is definitely a notable change from prior year work plan. And so I think a good one, but yes, Ed.
As I look around the table here, I think all of us hold one professional license or another where we have to have our CE credits and the 40 hours. Is that a standard or is that an ambition?
So according to GAGAS, generally accepted government auditing standards, we have to comply with getting 80 hours every 2 years.
Okay.
The 40 hours is just saying in every annual year, we will conduct at least 40. Doesn't mean there'll be more, but yes, it is a requirement.
I'm looking at Lloyd and I'm looking at Crystal behind her, and Emily, I can't see you, but welcome aboard. I've watched the auditors over the last several years and they do work themselves almost to death. So my hope is that there's some relief with these 40 hours. It's not sitting at your desk watching a video, but maybe some professional, whether it's, out of town, in town, but away from the work environment where you can get those CEs and, develop relationships and some good ideas and just get a breath of fresh air to come back and continue that hard work. Crystal's nodding over there. So that's fantastic. I'm glad to see you have that implemented in the plan and looking forward to more hard work. Thank you.
Agnes.
Yeah, thank you for the very comprehensive and detailed plan and all that. Question. So, before this meeting, I, like Dave, thought the problem of very limited to the, 125. But with the audited financial statement, the auditor's opinion, it seems like there are some issues in the accounting side. And I understand, the unusual circumstances, turnover and new system and all that, but that is not, we are not over that hump yet, right? So knowing what we know, today, does that change some of your audit focus, to make sure that, the internal controls or some, whatever we need to do to avoid having the same kind of issues next year?
Thank you for the question. And I would say, as Jennifer stated as well, that when we go into a program and we'll look at the internal controls and we'll determine whether the controls are working or not, or the level that they're working at, and that increase our testing. So that certainly increases the scope of our work. I should say, or increases the amount of the work that we need to do when we find those items. The concerns, I would say, when we look at SR 125 and when we made the recommendation to have an independent assessment of the finance department, we said very clearly, based on what we're seeing, we can't isolate this recommendation to just SR 125. We need to expand it to the entire department. So it certainly the state of what we see and the results of the audit are concerning, and we have to take that into consideration in how we plan and had the amount of hours that will be impacted.
Okay, great, thank you.
David?
Just quickly, really appreciate the outline on this and look forward to July to see what we're going to do.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just a couple of additional comments. I like the format. It's very nice to have a more comprehensive format. In this, one of the things I noticed is again, with respect to your performance evaluation is that it was simplified, which I think was simplified in a nice way. I will admit, I'm a little bit leery about the 50% increase in the use of the fraud hotline because I've been here long enough to know that it's been like 2, 9, 3, 7. It's like bumped around a lot. So I'm not quite sure how valid of a measure it is. But if you're comfortable with that measure, I'm comfortable with that measure. The other thing is, I think the previous document had some more detail embedded in it that might be useful to capture some way with respect to helping the audit committee when they're reviewing the performance evaluation. Like one example I would give is there was a fairly lengthy table in the previous document of all the things that had to happen, like, quarterly updates of this, annual updates of this. And it was, you could actually look down and say, oh, have all these things been done, right? So maybe it doesn't belong in this document, it would belong somewhere else, but just having access to that information would be useful. Then the last one that I was just wondering is, I know you and I had this conversation when you first came on board, and it would be good to capture it somehow, which was just my desire that right now, if I want to know the status of something, the only way I know how to do it is to try to remember when the last time it was presented to the audit committee and then go dig up that report and look where it is. So if we had, one of the things we were waiting for was your additional resource to come on board. But if we had a dashboard of some sort that said, this is where all the active audits are that still have open after action review items, that has like the status of it, that was the most recently thing presented to the audit committee or the board, or just a place that we could go saying, okay, here's all our closed audits, here's all our open ones. And just have a, really easy place to go to get the latest information would be great. I don't know how to capture that, but if we could include that so it actually becomes part of your objective, I would appreciate that. Other than that, those are my comments. And yeah, I think it's a great update to the document and looking forward to the finished product. With that, any other final comments or thoughts? I think that's it. I don't see any need for action at this point. You don't need any action from us. You just have this feedback, correct? So that takes us through the irregular agenda. The next audit committee meeting did get moved. We will be a special meeting July 11th at 1 p.m. to avoid the July 4th holiday weekend. Hopefully everybody will be ready to go with all the audits that will be coming up at that meeting. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.